Welcome. My name is James Bay. I want to share a little bit about the foundations of Buddhist thought and practice, specifically for our ongoing courses on Vajrayana, Buddhist yoga, generation, and completion phase. Before embarking on these subtle body practices, it's important to have a clear understanding of the historical Buddhist teachings, specifically the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So, in this ongoing series of talks, we'll explore these foundational tenets or principles of Sutrayana, Mahayana, as well as the Vajrayana. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths really synopsize his essential understanding and teaching. They begin with understanding the nature of life itself as being characterized as suffering. So we've heard this phrase before. Dukkha. Dukkha refers to the metaphor of a wheel that is off kilter. So the first noble truth has to do with our orientation towards life. And the basic journey of the contemplative life begins with understanding suffering. And what exactly did the Buddha mean when he spoke about suffering? Of course, we could use the term off kilter, in other words, how we view life. The Buddha was referring to the impermanent nature of our experiences, how all of our experiences are filtered through our self-perception. So that which is the nature of suffering is the existential experience of birth, aging, or illness, as well as death. So birth, old age, sickness, and death. In these four phases of life, we experience suffering. And for many, the experience of suffering actually comes about through contacting that which is deemed as adverse or painful. So contacting painful circumstances in life really gives us insight into this first noble truth. Another aspect is contacting or meeting with loved ones and losing them. So coming into contact with that which is precious and the experience of loss, the subsequent experience of pain, lamentation, sorrow, distress. These are the characteristic experiences, psychological experiences, which the Buddha characterized as suffering. And the Buddha also taught a second noble truth, that which is to be abandoned. So the first noble truth is to deeply understand suffering and really get the point that he's making. Second is to abandon the very cause of suffering. So Shakyamuni taught that the five aggregates that we've been discussing, the skandhas, form, feeling, perception, consciousness, and formation, these five aggregates verily amount to suffering experience when we identify and cling to them. In addition, with respect to form, the first term is rupa. Form is composed of the 4 or 5 elements based on which Buddhist schema: earth, water, fire, wind, and space. So we begin to penetrate to the heart of suffering by directing our mindfulness to the body of 4 or 5 elements. And in the fourth foundation of mindfulness, we explore these 4 or 5 elements of nature, as well as the aggregates in the phenomenal world. So we begin to see how, again, all phenomena and all experience is compounded. And there's the term interdependent origination. So we will return to these. Now, this is important because even in the completion phase, even in the practice of great completion, there are orientations towards suffering. For instance, suffering is related to the conditioned experience of samsara. And the third noble truth that the Buddha taught was the cessation of suffering itself. The cause of suffering is said to be clinging or thirst related to desire. It's this longing for experience which is based on our own predilections. But these four noble truths also underscore the law of cause and effect, or what we know as karma. Now, if we explore deeply that which we are drawn towards in life, and this experience of thirst, desire, clinging, and attachment, these causes of suffering, the experience of samsara is described. Now, the opposite of samsara would be nirvana. And the Buddha taught, there is, O bhikkhus or monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, and unfabricated. If there were not that unborn, unbecome, unmade, and unfabricated, there would not be the case that freedom could be born, made, fabricated, even discerned. But precisely because there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, and unfabricated, emancipation from all that arises, becomes, is made, and is fabricated. This would be unintelligible. It could not be discerned. So all of these four noble truths are interlinking. And as we gain insight into the four noble truths, we penetrate to the heart of reality. Of course, this is a framework for teaching that which the historical Buddha saw from his own experience, his own wisdom eye. But we know in Vajrayana practice, tantric practice, we have tenets such as the single taste of samsara and nirvana. And we find a kernel of wisdom within the suffering we experience. There simply is no distinction between samsara and nirvana. And we also look to co-emergent wisdom. So we say that may my own confusion dawn as wisdom, that the two are interlinked. So no matter where we are on the wheel of Buddhist thought and practice, these fundamental tenets ring true. It's just how we penetrate to the heart. Now, we'll move to the Arya Ashtanga Marga, the Noble Eightfold Path. That means that there's a journey and there's a path. Once we see the target, once we see the goal, we move towards that goal following the Eightfold Path. Now, in Vajrayana, Tantric Buddhism, we refer to this practice or this vehicle as the resultant vehicle. And the Buddha was speaking, as we know from the threefold canon, ethics or Vinaya, Abhidharma or metaphysics and epistemology, as well as the sutra basket, the Tripitaka. He was teaching from Sutrayana. And so this first turning of the wheel is ground level contemplative wisdom. It really just looks very rationally. It's referred to as a medical model. So for those of us who are engaging in Buddhist or Vajrayana practice and applying that wisdom towards our healing and clinical work, we can see this framework again as a medical model. There's a cause or an etiology. When we look to the nature of the condition, its cause, and its remedy. And we know that the Buddha said, may I become the doctor, the medicine, the nurse. Buddhism is about healing. Liberation is healing. It's healing from the sickness of separation. And when we take up this path, it always begins with one or two of these 8 limbs. Now we can begin with right view. And for those studying the 3 turnings of the wheel, we understand that there are many different doctrinal turnings. Let's go through the Eightfold Path. They comprise of right view, right intention, thought, or resolve. So right intention I'll use, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi, or samyak, right wisdom. Now, here's quite a clear exposition of cause and effect. What we're referring to was that in this medicine, which is Dharma, a resultant vehicle establishes that the view and the journey itself are one. The destination and the starting point are a singularity. So that is the resultant vehicle, we say, ground, path, and fruition. Now, in the causal vehicles, which means we try to work with suffering in a very practical manner, we take steps to contribute to positive mental states, and we work to clear away illusion or confusion. So just like taking out thorns, we work pragmatically, and we understand that this model is experiential. So we have to look into our own experience. What creates suffering? What alleviates suffering? In order to practice the Vajrayana specifically, we have to have wisdom as our starting point. That is going to be the ground. And we recognize it as the very ground of our experience. For those of you who've been practicing the yogas, we say that there is a empty nature in the Mahayana turning of the wheel. With that, the path itself is largely composed not only of shamatha and vipassana and gaining insight into the nature of suffering, its cause, following the Eightfold Path, we begin to develop an aspiration to benefit self and other. There is clearly an altruistic orientation to the Mahayana path. As well, we work with the 6 paramitas, foremost of which is prajna paramita. And along the way, both in Sutrayana and Mahayana, the 4 measurables are an essential heart practice. We have methods such as Tonglen, giving and receiving, equalizing and exchange, all the Lojong mind trainings. These encapsulate the Buddha's essential teachings on compassion and the way to cultivate loving kindness and compassion in service of all sentient beings. When we think about the cessation of suffering, this notion of a single taste of samsara, nirvana, gives a rather positive interpretation. So again, it boils down to right view or right wisdom. The 3rd turning of the wheel is that of Tathagata Garbha, the wisdom nature. We have texts like Lamrim Yeshe Ningpo, the graduated stages of the path of the wisdom essence. You have an understanding of this goal, which is the very ground, but we have practical manners and a mapping or a journey to fulfill that destiny simply by wiping away the stains of this jewel-like mind the mirror-like wisdom, we recognize our own wisdom nature. In the Vajrayana, we base our methods on this understanding of our wisdom nature. And we bring that and apply that to the path, the Vajrayana path. So back to the Eightfold path, it consists of right view. And from that view, again, it could be the Sutrayana view, Mahayana view, Vajrayana, or the Tathagata Garbha, which is taught in Maitreya's fifth work, the Uttara Tantra Shastra. Wherever we land in terms of this Buddhist worldview, we understand the path, which is composed of meditation and conduct. So there we find ethics. Let's move towards ethics. Right view, right thought or intention, right speech, and right action or conduct. It all boils down to what our intention is. In the Mahayana, our intention, we give rise to the wish, aspiration that all be freed from suffering. And we seek to achieve the benefit of self and others. So this altruistic concern or motivation is also part of the Buddhist right view. Similarly, what we're talking about is cause and effect. All of us can have performed similar work, similar activities, but when it comes to what is going on, what is our modus operandi, what's our motivation or intention, this is really which secures the fruit. And in the graduated path, the very practical approach to finding freedom, we do work to eliminate the causes of suffering, pain, as well as confusion. So do our actions give rise to virtuous states of mind? Because that provides for circumstances of happiness, but also clarity and the ability to achieve positive goals, including what is referred to as emancipation, cessation, or freedom. Right speech really boils down to not harsh speech, gossip, it's like idle chatter, offensive language, speaking ill of others, just divisive speech. And most importantly, is being honest and truthful. Right speech, right thought, right action. If we took these three together, what's really important in our contemporary life is also our livelihood, that which we enact most days of the week to secure our livelihood. We want to make sure that the work we do really does support happiness and freedom. It could be a means to an end. If our intention is to care for our family, as well as to bring about positive circumstances, there are many professions we could be engaged in. But we could be engaged in the Dharma or in other types of seemingly beneficial activities, including the practice of medicine. But if we seek to monetize off of others' suffering or really increase prices of medicines, not making them available, what kind of service do we actually offer? If it's materially motivated, if it's self-focused, there will be limited benefit. We may secure positive circumstances in the near future, but we want to make sure all of us owe a debt to nature, to society, to our community, to our families, ancestries. So what we do on the day-to-day over the course of a career is really essential. So even if our work is healing work, may we bring to mind this noble thought or intention. Now, the last three limbs of the Eightfold Path include right concentration or samadhi, right mindfulness. And we can also just say right wisdom. And now, what the Buddha was speaking about was the union in Buddhist meditation of calm abiding and special insights. So when we consider right meditation, we're talking about jhana practice. We're talking about shamatha, calm abiding. The text that most of us have learned from is Bhavanakrama of Kamalashila. We learn the rudiments or the basic practice of calm abiding with an object or support, calm abiding without support, and mindfulness. Right mindfulness can refer to kaya gata sati or the practices of satipatthana. So that means mindfulness of the body or mindfulness of the breath in 16 stages. We'll go over those first. First, we attune to the breath and focus on whether it is short or long, whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then to the whole body of the breath. Inhale, inhale, pause, exhale, exhale, pause. Or focus on the whole experience of the embodied breath, the sensation of this movement of the breath, which we delineate in 4 phases. Then we move on to recognizing how it calms the body formation as we attune interoceptively to the breath in these 4 phases. We recognize perhaps that it is impermanent. The breath comes of its own accord. Our body is breathed. It is the natural 5 elements, compounded phenomena. And we penetrate to the very heart of the wisdom underlying this vital movement. Now, in the great completion, in the completion phase yogas, we recognize that bringing together right mindfulness, shamatha, and vipassana is the basis of the view and meditation of the completion phase, or Vajrayana meditation, that includes Mahamudra, Dzogchen, the completion phase. It is the union of shamatha and vipassana, the union of method and wisdom. And lastly, we arrive at what is right samadhi and right wisdom. We're coming right back to the ground. So the journey, the starting point, the ground, and the fruition are one. So however we understand the Buddhist path, these are 4 pillars, 4 noble truths. What is suffering? What is the nature of suffering? Again, it is clinging to the aggregates. These aggregates are the 5 Buddha families. The elements are the 5 Dakini Mandala. These all reside in the body. Our view shifts as we practice secret mantra Vajrayana. And what is healing is simply uncovering this profound wisdom at the root of our own experience. What is suffering? What is the nature of suffering? It's described as how confusion arises from the ground. What is the cause of suffering? Misapprehension of the ground and apparent phenomenon, what we call samantabandha. How confusion arises? What is the path? It is self-liberating or transforming delusion right on the spot. Recognizing wisdom within the kleshas or poisons themselves, and always settling back into the ground, the view of primordial purity and evenness. And lastly, what is the path? It is liberating everything that we encounter in life. There is no freedom outside of this embodiment. So we come to the last point of our Vajrayana psychology course, is we are taking the path of the body. And again, the maxim is the very nature of our own mind is the gateway to the Dharmakaya. The very nature of reality is accessed through the fundamental nature of the body. The Vajra body, speech, and mind are none other than our own limited body, energy, breath, emotions, psyche. our lived experiences, none other than the wisdom to be uncovered. This is the practice of Vajrayana.